So, we've talked about the entourage effect and some of these potential interactions with different cannabinoids and terpenes. We've talked about the importance of dose. We were just getting into edibles and how, there's products available today commercially that contain extraordinary doses. Let's talk a little bit about the consumer experience today. So, you walk into a dispensary and no matter where you are, you can be in any state that has a state legal dispensary system. You walk into a dispensary, it's going to be some version of the following. There's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of products. There's going to be all kinds of strains, right? You're going to walk in and you're going to see all of these different cannabis strains. And the bud tender is very likely to tell you that there's two or three types of cannabis strain. There's the indicas and the sativas. If they're particularly into cannabis, they might even try and throw some other knowledge at you. So, for example, I'm starting to hear bud tenders say indicas make you sleepy, and the reason for that is they have more myrcene. Sativas make you excited, and the reason for that is any number of things that I hear: less THC, more THC, some CBD. I mean, I hear everything. So, what is your general viewpoint on the way that cannabis flower is classified and talked about in the commercial setting today?
Nonsense.
And can you just kind of unpack maybe the history there? So what is let's just tell people what is the notion of an indica and a sativa? Do we know where that comes from? And
We know where it comes from, but it's been bastardized in modern parlance.
mhm,
Okay, let's break it down. Um, Linnaeus designated cannabis as cannabis sativa, but he didn't originate the name. It was used for at least 250 years before him by Leonhard Fuchs and others. But Linnaeus is mid 18th century. So cannabis sativa means cultivated cannabis. Um, 25 years later in France, Lamarck described what he thought was a different species, Cannabis indica.
mhm,
Now, I can show you pictures of the exact plants that are these supposed to correspond to. So Lamarck's Cannabis indica was bushier, but had narrow leaflets. Okay. In modern parlance, what people refer to as indica are Afghan type plants. They're short, meter or less. They have very broad leaflets, very dark, and they have a particular chemical profile. Um, but the problem in taxonomy, what a thing is called in botany, is it's ever changing.
mhm.
I like to say if you have 12 botanical taxonomists, you'll have 25 different opinions. This is a riff on an old Yiddish proverb. Um, but quite truthfully, what we've got now are these descriptions of indica and sativa that have no relation to what the plant looks like or its biochemical contents. Also, I'm going to pick at the term strain. There are
Mhm.
no strains in plants. What we should talk about in relation to cannabis is chemovars, chemical varieties. That's what matters in terms of the effects that people are going to get from a particular variety of cannabis. Strain applies to bacteria and viruses. You hear the word a lot now in relation to varying strains of COVID-19. Well, SARS-CoV-2, the virus itself. COVID-19 is the disease caused by it. Um, I really think bud tenders and everyone should avoid the terms sativa and indica. It is better to have a description of what's in the plant,
Mhm.
its cannabinoid profile, its terpenoid profile, also descriptions of what consumers have said in relation to its use. Um, so, is it innervating? Is it sedating? Does it brighten mood? Is it contemplative? Does it aid sleep? What are the effects that a population of people have noticed that seem to be the common threads?
Mhm. And do you think so essentially what you've just said, correct me if I'm wrong, is the sort of two key things you'd want to know about a product to ascertain what its effects might be are one, its chemical composition. How much THC does it have? What's its terpene profile? And two, what have other people said the effects were when they tried the same thing? And that makes a lot of sense on the one hand. So the chemistry perfectly makes sense. I guess the key issue there is that information is more or less completely unavailable other than the THC percentage and CBD percentage today.
Well, that's a political problem.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I'm really serious about this. This is the kind of thing that should be mandated.
Hmm.
When you buy any other product, you go to the supermarket, you've got thousands of products on the shelves. And it's really simple to pick one up and see, is it organic? What is the list of ingredients?
Hmm.
Is it just stuff that comes from nature, or are there a bunch of preservatives and other things that are added? So then the consumer can decide. Now we've got a psychoactive agent sold in stores where you may or may not get good advice about what it's all about. And we've got very limited information. Basically, often you may get how much THC and CBD is in it. I would submit that's wholly inadequate. You need to know the cannabinoid profile, the terpenoid profile, what kind of safety testing has it undergone?
Hmm.
Has this been proven to be free from pesticides? How about heavy metal contamination? What about bacterial contamination?
Hmm.
Now, the downside is all this stuff costs money, and companies who make these materials are not going to spend it if the state doesn't mandate it. But we managed to have consumer protection for a whole range of other products, and there's no reason that less stringent standards should apply to cannabis.
Hmm. How do you think? So let's hypothetically, let's say we fast forward and we do get these mandates. It's really intuitive for people to look at a consumer packaged good and see that, okay, it's been tested for heavy metals. That sounds good. It's been tested for pesticides. That sounds good. The average consumer at this point for cannabis has probably a good understanding of THC percentage and how that relates to potency. Then you start getting into other cannabinoids and terpenes, and it starts to get very complicated very quickly. So, in your mind, what would be the ideal way to actually communicate this information to the average consumer with no real scientific background?
Sure. Well, again, it's best through consumer education. Now, that can come from informed bud tender staff. And it's like anything else. There's a bell-shaped curve in terms of the advice that people get in that setting. It can be really bad advice. It can be informed advice. People make a big mistake. My son was runner-up for best bud tender in Seattle a few years back. His pet peeve was the average person came in and said, "Give me the stuff with the highest THC."
Hmm.
And he would spend a lot of time and effort to try and explain why they should be disabused of this notion. The better question is, what are you looking for in your experience? And that may not come from the highest THC. It may come from a lower THC with a more nuanced profile of other ingredients. How can this be imparted to patients? Well, there are ways. One example is the Phytofacts report that Mark Lewis, my former colleague, developed. And it has all the numbers of the cannabinoids and terpenoids in it. It's got bar graphs showing how much of each thing, but it also has graphics showing tastes and smells associated with it, and most important, what the reactions of consumers have been to it. So again, does it make you sleepy? Does it wake you
Hmm.
up? Does it elevate mood? Um,
Hmm.
and this is experiential data from consumers. And I think this kind of thing, it can be presented in one page and it can be explained to people uh, in a reasonable time frame.
Hmm. How strong do you think the effect of suggestion is with cannabis? Because on the one hand, um, I personally agree with you that the way that terms like indica and sativa are used and applied is basically total nonsense in the industry. On the other hand, when you actually go and look at the consumer reviews and I've looked at hundreds of thousands of these. What you tend to find is people say that the indicas are sleepier. And so for my money, what's happening is, there's a huge dose dependent effect. There's a wide range of potential products out there with different ingredients that we don't know what they are. So you walk into a dispensary, someone says, I want something to make me sleepy. The bud tender is going to say, try an indica because indicas make you sleepy because we just believe that. And then you just go home and consume it until you fall asleep. And then you write a review saying it did in fact make you sleepy. So there's this sort of loop that somehow needs to get broken.
Yeah, yeah, that's valid. People can be really suggestible under the influence of cannabis. If you want to sell the Brooklyn Bridge to somebody, that may be one way to do it. Yeah, again, people can be steered in the direction of having an opinion that conforms to what they were told. Yeah, it's definitely it. It's one reason that formal randomized controlled studies of anything that's psychoactive affects the mind are very difficult.